Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Today, we're doing part two of Mavenspire's series on AI in the mid-market. So just to give you a little context, in our first chapter, our first video, we focused on why you would even want to pay attention to AI. There's clearly a buzzword. There's clearly a lot of energy around the buzzword, but we took some time to deep dive into what the actual term AI can possibly mean. We sort of segmented it into three places where we talked about virtual assistants that are about personal productivity. We talked about integrated AI into applications. So you have a mission critical app that now comes out with an AI feature. How do you address that? What is that all about? And then the third place we talked about AI platforms, which are the place where you build out and do something different for your business intentionally. Today, we're going to talk about who is AI for, who do you need to make AI happen, who in your organization needs to be part of the conversation. Now, I'm joined this morning by another Michael Bresler. We'll take a few seconds just to, if you don't know us, we'll take a few moments to just say who we are. Michael, you want to go first?
Sure, Michael, I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Mavenspire, for having me. Hello, my name is Michael Bresler. I'm from the Baltimore, Maryland area. I've spent my career of over 25 years looking at operational excellence in technology for organizations. So that means identifying what you can do more of and identifying ways to free yourself up through automation of pain points. My organization, I'm the founder of Broad Heights, which essentially helps organizations be able to maximize dollars and free up staff time through operational excellence and AI.
Awesome. So for those who don't know me, I'm Michael Tannenhouse, CEO of Mavenspire. And for the last 25 plus years, I've spent the majority of my career taking on emerging technology or technology revolutions, as sometimes people joke, and figuring out how to make them something that propels an organization to the next level. What's the next level? Well, it can be about a business plan. It can be about frustration or friction of something that's holding them back. And sometimes it can just be a rebranding or a market change where the world has changed around them and the organization needs to make a change to be relevant in the new world order. So again, thanks very much for being here. What I'd like to start with is I'd like to talk about the consequences of getting the who wrong. So if you don't have the right people at the table, if the conversation about AI is coming, people joke that like the C-level or the board will say, we need AI now. And people who've been doing this a while laugh because it was like that like 5 years ago with cloud, like we must be cloud, right? And so everyone is left to kind of figure out what that means. So, but I want to focus it on the AI side. So if you have been told by your board you need AI, if you've been told by your executives AI is part of their bonus, if you found out in IT that people are using AI and you didn't know, how do you get control of that situation? Who needs to be at the table? Michael, you want to take a stab at it?
Sure. Well, since we're talking about the impacts, right, of not having the people at the table, I think one of the biggest impacts that comes to mind is around adoption. If you don't have the right people at the table, you're not going to be able to get the value out of the technology that you want, right? So the sales guys are going to come in, or you're going to see some demo video and you're going to get excited about the promises of technology specific to AI, right? What AI can do. And it can do a lot of amazing things. But in reality, the success point is not bringing in the technology and signing the license. The success is actually leveraging the technology to the maximum of its ability. So I think that's one that comes to mind. The second one is going to be around privacy and confidentiality, right? Because I think with AI and really just easy accessibility for free licenses or even the paid licenses, but they're all on the public side of the licensing structures, where they don't carry the same level of privacy, confidentiality, SOC 2 encryption, things like that as an enterprise would. that there's definitely a lot of risk right now for organizations or even people in general putting things into AI that they really shouldn't be putting in. And I think that's a big part of a challenge of not having people at the table is the risk of downstream impacts of your client's data, grantee data, your own data.
That's really interesting. I was in kind of a let's call it a LinkedIn argument, a lovely, passionate conversation over LinkedIn about what was more important, knowing the destination or just jumping in and getting some momentum going. And that is I don't think we were specifically necessarily talking about AI, but in truth, that does seem to be the argument for AI right now. People just want to see it do something amazing. They don't necessarily have a goal. But then in the doing of that, you start finding out that maybe your data isn't truly very organized, or maybe no one knows where that data is, or who owns it, um, or whether it's normalized so that like something can understand what's going on with the data. You have it's super interesting to me to watch. 15 years ago, Mavenspire was big in the document management space. We were an exclusive purveyor of a particular European system where in Europe, document management is actually part of core operations. Like people have been doing document management, not file servers, document management forever, where you meta tag everything and it has meaning and you can search for it. And here in the United States, what we found is that a lot of people considered it a waste of time. People were very much like, I can just make a folder and put the data in the folder, and like tagging, what's tagging, right? And roll that forward to the AI era when these models are rolling across your data, they are looking at what's there and what information is available to give it context. And so lacking either a what is the problem we're trying to solve destination or decently organized data, we have a lot of people that are saying that when we spin up AI, like it's not the inside AI that's really doing it, it's the outside. It's something that helps me rewrite something that helps me trawl through internet knowledge and figure out how to do something that helps me code better. Those are the ones that seem to be hitting faster because they're not really about internal data. But the ones with the most value to your organization are the ones that involve your internal data. And so it's a little bit of a catch-22 out of the gate. And back to the who, when you're talking about your internal data, it's the people that own it, the people that use it, the people that interpret it. All of those people have to be in the conversation because they're the ones that know where the skeletons in the closet are. They're the ones that say things like, oh, well, that data's wrong. We just correct it like this every week. And if nobody knew that, you could go all the way through a project that creates absolutely no good data.
Yeah. Well, the irony is that people are out there talking about AI and how AI is something special of a magic wand, right? But AI is really a tool that's no different than implementing another tool. So I think your point around like the goal setting is really, really critical because the one thing that AI has done, which has actually made that question more critical, is how I put it is just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? So 5 years ago, it was like, I need to hire a social media marketing person to get social media out there, right? And now I could use all these tools that will, integrate with their own version of ChatGPT, will write my content for me, will integrate with all the platforms, right? Supposedly to what? Get me views, get me engagement. But if it's not part of your overall marketing plan, like how are you leveraging the connections to funnel into your business? Like the point is, what does the success mean? Right? Are you after, does number of followers mean anything to you? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And I think that's part of the challenge with the AI piece is that it really helps you go so much faster, but faster in the wrong direction is still the wrong direction. Also the vibe coding, which I've used, I love it, but it's actually a distraction for me. It's like, do I need to build an app just because I can build an app? Do I need to build an app? Right? All the things that I thought about before that maybe I don't need, and maybe part of why I didn't need it was because it was complex and expensive. But it's like that trifecta, right? Of time, cost, and speed, right? It seems like time has kind of shrunk, and so has cost in a way. Um, but that doesn't mean you should do it. And I think that's one of the things that's really important around making sure you have success. Because I've had clients come to me and ask for something, and my response is always, well, what are your objectives? Right. And the objective is not to start doing it. That's not the objective is not 10
Right.
posts a week. That's not an objective, right?
Yeah. It's all
It
about
needs
the
to be
destination,
something
right?
that's, yeah, measurable. The other thing I'll add is it's actually really interesting. I'm finding the same thing that you're seeing, which is in the work I'm doing, it is really just, and that's why I preach around the process first, because really what happens is you go into an organization and they want something to happen. And a lot of times it is, we want better, something actionable to happen. And then you start talking about, well, how does action happen from that? Well, you need data, right? What kind of data do you have? And then it's like, well, we don't really have data. We have, like you said, our document management is all over the place. We have 2 CRMs. It's like kind of a crazy thing. So you can't really, even though some people will try, you can't really overlay anything on top of that. You need to make sure your foundation is good before you start putting things, on top of it, with the idea to help automate those things. And so I think what happens is the easy low-hanging fruit is the person who uses ChatGPT to like write a faster email or to do deep research, right? Or to like come up with a marketing plan that's a little faster or do a board report, right? There's so many things that AI can help you with that are kind of very specific to your own job and your own tasks at your desk. But the bigger opportunities of AI, what AI really can do for you, which is like that 10x opportunity for organizations, is very much heavily reliant on the people you have and the processes you have, and making sure that you have all the things that you need inputted to essentially output into the AI tool. So if you don't have that, then there's only really so much AI can do to exponentially move. It's kind of like when we learn the math tables, in I guess fourth or fifth grade or second grade, anything times zero is zero. And so like when you take AI and I say 10x, I've seen 10x, 10x, return from AI. But if you multiply it times zero or one or two, right, you're not going to get great if you have a really amazing level of data and you're buttoned up and your processes are working and you've kind of cleaned up your licenses and you don't have all this like vendor sprawl, then AI is gonna help. And what I'll share is that MIT had this article probably a couple of weeks ago now that 95% of AI projects fail. And it's like the funniest thing because it kind of it takes this framing that AI is not real, AI is not helpful, and AI is not really what it could be. Well, the reality is that 95% of those projects fail because of this conversation, right? They fail because you're bringing in a tool and you're not actually going through the process of what's my current state process. What do you actually need to make that happen? If you go in and you believe the folks that are going to tell you that AI is a magic wand and we'll go in and we'll just put AI all over your stuff and we'll say it's okay that you have not a great foundation, that's why it fails. And then there's another article that's kind of interesting enough, was talking about how this is an article from the UK that a lot of companies now that were early in AI from a couple of years ago are now essentially untangling themselves from AI because they found that by building AI on top of their bad infrastructure, it's actually costing them more money because they now have to manage one more thing, one more process on top of another process that's not good anyways. So
I think
yeah,
that's a natural cycle there, right? Like now we have repatriation from cloud because of AI, and
yeah.
like there's always the unwind from the hype cycle. But let's take something that you were talking about, which is like the crazy 95% of projects fail, AI projects. One of the things that strikes me, by the way, is every year I do Google what percentage of IT projects fail. And it is always my entire career. Maybe it's the perfectionist in me. That number is actually always high. Like
Yeah.
it has been well over 60% for my entire career. And I always wonder how that plays out in an organization. Like if 60+% of things you attempt to do fail, like, and you look at all the change and success that's been there on like less than 40%, like it just seems kind of crazy, right? But it doesn't surprise me that in the hype cycle of people just jumping in and trying to get something going, that 95% of the time it has no value back because you didn't start with value. So let's back up to, if we had to write a cookbook for success of an AI project, and I get, because we've had this conversation, that it's not really specifically AI. Like pretty much all technology revolutions or even business revolutions would benefit from the same cookbook. But for AI, trying to put down a cookbook, what would elements would it have to be in there? We talked about a direction, right? You have to know your destination, which, by the way, I will say, I don't know that we specifically said it this morning. Starting small is always a good thing, right? The people that are throwing the, like, it's the rocket ship kind of thing out there worry me, because that means they haven't gone through the process of getting a small win and learning the lessons for their organization, their culture, their people. How much change is tolerable in that organization? If you try to shoot the moon and no one's ready to do that with you, you're going to be awfully lonely.
Yeah, no, 100%. So I think the steps are, you've got to identify direction, right? Where are you trying to go? What are your goals and objectives? Because that will also not only help you drive towards the goal, but it'll also help you, as you free up time with automation, help you think about retraining, upskilling staff, right? If that's the direction that you want to go in. The other thing, so what I'll do as I focus is start talking about what are those pain points, start to catalog processes. A lot of times organizations don't have the operating procedures. So I think that for one of the first steps is cataloging pain points and processes that leadership, or in most cases, who should be at the table is the staff actually doing the work, because they're the ones that usually know all the problems that, you know, keep them up at night, or the things that are a pain in the butt. Usually those things don't go up the ranks, right? Because things shift over time. And then, like you said, it's starting small and iterative. And so the reason why it's important to do a catalog of processes is to start to prioritize and identify what are the initial projects that are going to yield you the most ROI, which means the least complex and the fastest to market. Because ultimately what you want to do, because you know how it is, we've all led organizations, we all get very impatient about ROI. Nobody wants, like, oh my God, it's a 14-month payback period. People want to see, you know, oh, if I could give you an ROI in 90 days. It doesn't mean that it's a payback. It just means, hey, we were able to reduce customer calls by 10% in 90 days. We hope it'll go more, but at least to show you something, right? And I think that's, especially as you're going through change management, a lot of it is you've got to start with like the small things that are much more frictionless. And because the big things are the sexy things. That's what everyone loves, right? Everyone loves the big, sexy changes. Yeah. But those things take so long. And also the other thing is they take 12 months, 14 months. And the way the world is working right now, you have no idea what's going to happen in 10 months. I mean, your project could just, or 3 months, your project could just, you wake up one morning and, you know, like I just saw the other day, you know, Microsoft, I mean, they were, you know, using ChatGPT 5, and now they just signed a license with Anthropic, right? Like, I mean, I was working with a client where we were like putting it on ChatGPT, and then they wanted to go on Copilot. It was like, well, Copilot has ChatGPT too. And now, oh, we're going to go to Claude. Like, it's just all your plans kind of get messed up by the uncontrollables. And so I think the prioritization is an important piece by cataloging. And then I think from a people side, it really is getting the people who are closest to the work involved with the conversations as part of that process. And I think it's really two reasons. The first is the people who are really at the desk doing the work or on the front lines doing the work. They're the ones that really have in their head like the top 3 problems that could be fixed, right? And they may not bring it up. They may have brought it up a long time ago. Maybe no one listened. They may bring it up once in a while. No one listens. And they might be too busy to even like think about it, because that's what happens a lot of times. And then the second thing is, in order for actual change to happen, which means we implement something and now that team actually takes it, you know, embraces it and uses it, is that they have to feel heard. So they have to feel like they had input into what people are doing for their job. And it's I mean, in my work, every profession from teacher to accountant, right, it's always the response is always, well, who told you this was a problem? Oh, the CFO. They don't know. Or a teacher will say, well, the principal, they don't teach, they're not in the classroom, they don't know, right? And so it's really about hearing at the high level organizationally from leadership, but then it's also just understanding from the folks in the front lines, again, for those two reasons, which is the adoption buy-in piece, which is a huge critical part, maybe the most important part to reach that goal. And then the other one is getting those insights from those folks because they're the ones that are living it every day.
All right, so let me sum back up. So you had the people who do it every day, the
Mm-hmm.
leadership that is setting the goal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think, is that all of it? Like the people who have to do it clearly, like so you need the technologists that are actually doing the implementation to hear from both of them.
Yes. Yes.
We talked, you made a comment about culture a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think that's a good point to make, that there's usually a disconnect between leadership and what they're being valued on and the goals they're setting, and how clearly they communicate that within the company, the organization. Some of that has to do with culture and methodology, but these are, AI or any major technology innovation is an innovation, which
Mm-hmm.
means it has a fear factor. In my experience, people have been trying to do automation for a long time, but what happens is they try to do it bottom up.
Yeah.
Like they fix their personal problem, but the fear of the company or organization judging it keeps it from getting widespread acceptance. So in that sense, I would emphasize this has to come top down. It has to be something that starts
Mm-hmm.
with leadership saying, this is the goal we want to hit. And we are looking for your help in creating efficiency or success or whatever that goal is. And we love everyone's ideas and we want to try them in the context of this AI thing. And we need some ambassadors to help people. That's the other one that I would add. You need to
Mm-hmm.
curate a set of ambassadors, the people that are already jumping off and doing it. You can
Sure.
change your shadow AI risks into ambassadors who are comfortable with the idea, excited about the idea, and can help others get excited versus being resistive. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's all about working the problem to the same common destination. As long as it's clear and leadership backs, then everybody can have the freedom to do that. When any of that does not line up, if there is not alignment from the top to the bottom, then there's always that frustration and fear that they're not going to be valued for their contribution, and they're going to resist it. They're going to resist the
Yeah.
change.
Yeah, no,
Right?
that's a great point. The ambassadors, the champions are critical pieces. So I think it's really top down, bottom up, right? Grassroots, and then it's somewhere you have in the middle as well, the leadership in the middle, right? Who are the ones ultimately who are going to be responsible for some of the oversight and rethinking some of the roles and things like that. I think those are, and then of course, I mean, those are the folks who are close to the problem and the technology and the strategy. I mean, the other groups are going to be, your technical partners internally. You're going to need your legal compliance in some cases, especially around depending on the problem you're trying to solve. It's a financial problem or a customer data problem. Um, you know, uh, what's called PII. Personal
Yeah.
identifiable information, right? Like you'll need certain folks. Maybe your security team. You'll need certain folks who are experts in like certain areas, just to make sure that the solution you bring in also is checks the boxes for some of those teams as well. Because I think that's another piece about the buy-in, right? Is it's not just about the problem solving. So I think what happens is the first part of just identifying the opportunity and then getting the leadership and the direction and then getting the staff on board and the champions is one part of it. But then as you do the solutioning itself, it's then being able to partner with the technology group because you're going to want to also be considerate of their tech stack as far as what tool you pick, right?
Yeah.
Because the reality is, I mean, not all tools play nice with every other tool. And sometimes there are other tools that are just either accessible or very integratable because they're part of a same ecosystem. And sometimes that integration or ecosystem, may play more of a role than maybe a functionality that, it doesn't have. Which is a lot of what I see now, which is a lot of organizations really pushing Copilot because it's there. I have Microsoft Office, I have
Yeah.
Copilot, right?
But you
And
have to
when you
be
go
linked to
in and you
graph.
say,
Yeah.
right, you got to figure out like, okay, Copilot's okay. I mean, it's actually not that good, but it's
Right.
okay. It's not as good as another one. is it worth having like a ChatGPT or worth having a Claude? And look, I deal with this all the time. I mean, my business is Google. I have Gemini. I happen to like Gemini, but Gemini to me doesn't do as well like, for some of these other tasks as like ChatGPT does, right? So I have a ChatGPT license also. So I think that's, but I'm small. So that's part of the conversation is at some point, I will be moving towards Gemini because every day it's more and more integrated into my life, and
Right.
more
Well,
ChatGPT is
that's that
not.
application integrated
Right.
thing, right? Right.
And then there's the pain of, oh my God, now I got to move all my stuff over, which is usually the biggest obstacle, frankly, with people is getting them to move their like like you mentioned data management, right? Like, okay, so you have people putting their stuff on Box or SharePoint or even their hard drive or some Google Drive, maybe that's their own personal drive. It's about not it's not only about providing the system of the structure and the data and maybe the tools that are going to help you get more insight into the document management side, but it's getting the people to take the time to actually move the documents over, which is I've seen a lot of that organizationally where an organization, let's say, is using, the people have been using a free ChatGPT and then they get an enterprise license. And now they're like, oh, move your work over to the paid because we've given you a license from our organization. And a lot of people are still using the free one unless they run out of capacity and they go to the paid. And I think Canva, which I see for nonprofits, is also one of those things where, Canva is free for nonprofits, right? And a lot of organizations, you'll have teams who have been using the free version, but they don't want to go to the paid version because they just don't want to move their stuff, right? And so
Yeah,
like
because
that's
it's a
that's part
separate
of it.
tenancy model. But truthfully,
Yeah,
the thing that always, and this is a little off the who, but the free version doesn't have the security of the paid version, right?
right.
So
Well, that's
what
the point.
scares me is when people have that conversation about I don't want to move it. It's like, so what'd you put up there? Like, what exactly is in the free version? Because I'm sitting here thinking data leak nightmare, like all of those
No,
things that come
100%.
along with shadow AI right now. But you don't want to like crush a person because they're your next generation ambassadors. So you want them to
Hmm.
be excited as you very carefully pull the confidential data out of that tenant and get it
Yeah.
back to a place with security. I wanted to circle back since we're on this who topic. We both had a little bit of a challenge talking about the middle leadership, and I wanted to circle back and explain why. Um, so the problem that I've been seeing is that the leader at the top is not a set thing right now. We have
Hmm.
board leadership, we have C level of leadership, we have somebody who owns a line of business saying I need to change something so I get my mega bonus. They become the top leader. So the middle leadership is moving around based on who the top leader driving the charge is. And that's why it's a little hard to talk about it. If the board does it, the line of business leaders tend to be the middle. If the line of business leader is the driver, then you start funneling down to supervisors and departments, trying to figure out who's the person in the middle that has to kind of gather the resources and be on board and drive the change. When it's the C level driving down, it can still be the line of business leaders. Sometimes they are the C level though, and that makes it a little bit fuzzy. Um, but but the person who's defining the vision at the top and saying this
Hmm.
is the goal, this is the vision, this is where we need to get to, make it so, is assuming that a level below them is saying this is what I can do to add to that vision and to that goal, and I will
Hmm.
create my sprint to kind of run that. And so like that has actually been hard for some organizations to understand that there have to be champions kind of at all levels that are running the show, and
Yep.
defining that up front is like
Yeah.
almost as critical as the destination.
No, 100%. And part of that also is that the realization, right, that at every level, everybody is challenged with that same thing, which is change. I mean, you can't. I mean, like there are. Look, you like to think that the CEOs are all strategic and they're visionaries, but they're all not, right? And so even if you have one that is like, you always have along with those champions, right? I mean, look at any organization, you have the bell curve of change, and at every level, you're going to have folks who are, running to front and trying to get, trying to like be innovative, and then you're going to have the ones who are just status quo. I've done this forever. This is all I want to do. And a lot of times you're going to have that at every level, which is also part of the challenge, right? Is, sometimes, management leadership just want to do status quo, or not even in that kind of sense of status quo, but just like wondering what we do works. Why do we have to do something different? Right. And sometimes it is working, but it doesn't work as well. And sometimes it's not working, but they believe it's working and they haven't really accepted the fact that the world around them has changed.
So I wanted to, well, first of all, just from a housekeeping point of view, if you have questions, please feel free to type them into the chat or the Q&A. We're happy to continue to of course talk about this stuff. We do it all the time. But if you have anything specific you'd like to learn about, we are happy to address it specifically. I was wondering, Michael, do you have any stories to share where who was at the table really was the difference between something getting done and it not happening?
Oh, yeah. Stories. Oh man, there's so many stories. I mean, one that comes to mind, I mean, this was, already how many years ago? Maybe 10 years ago already, right? But essentially, we had started this kind of project where we had identified a bunch of very heavy manual processes. And the first step was to come up with a user group, right, of folks who, would have oversight or insight into some of the processes and how they worked, right? And what I did, my mistake, the thing I learned from that experience was, I had spoken to like the CEO level folk, and they had told me because again, it was like, to me, the simplest way to figure it out was to maybe leverage the insights of leadership. So I was given essentially like, here are the people who you have to talk to, right? Here are the people who should be around the table. And what happened was we had gone through a whole process where, like we talked about, we had folks around the table and we kind of came up with a direction. And then what happened was we had developed a workflow and developed wireframes and all these things. And then I started to go out and kind of connect with the actual users, right? It was all internal clients, but actual users. And it turned out that like what the leadership wanted and the workflow, it wasn't even the right current state. And a lot of the assumptions of how things should work, like it actually couldn't work that way because there were other inputs and outputs that were, unknown, right, to those folks. So I mean, I can get deeper, but that's what comes to mind. Like that's one example where, we went down a path where we had to correct ourselves because, and that's why I harp on getting the people at the ground floor all the time, because that experience was like, I mean, obviously I bring it up now, 10 years. It's probably more than 10 years ago, probably 15 years ago. But that experience was like a very like, oh my God moment. We went down the totally wrong track because the people who are doing it every day, we didn't talk to them. And the thing is, we spoke to we had the user group included the middle level folks who were overseeing those people. And some of them were like, oh, you don't have to talk to them because I used to do that job. I trained them on that job. Right. And so, but things change every month, 2 months, 5 months, 6 months, right? So like the job that they thought was the job was a different job now. Similar metrics for success, but not the same role, because as people also came into the role, they started to adjust some of the processes to their own preferences. Right, which is a lot of us do that kind of stuff, right? So that's one example.
Put their imprint on their job.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one example. But I also have examples on the other side, which is, having the right people in the room and being able to actually identify when it's actually a good solution or not. So like on the flip side, I've had projects where we had, and this is after learning that very strictly, no matter what people told me about who to be in the room, I was smart enough to say, well, I want I would go into the system and find like the biggest users of the tools, right? And get them into the room. And so I've had situations where the project or the objective or the success of the project or the kind of understanding of what the project was going to be dies in the first 30 minutes because you have the users who are there and they help come up with a different solution, right? So one of the projects was robotic process automation, and the team we were working with essentially was like, oh, we have all these processes that we have to check boxes and do this and do that, and we'd be great if we had RPA go in and do those things, right? And when we actually sat with the and in the meeting, we had the one of the super users there, and we're like, could you just demo us what you do? And they showed us, and it was like how we imagined. It wasn't the same, right? Because we were talking about it very hypothetically in a way. And then one of us mentioned and said, well, have we ever asked the vendor who provides the software just to default the checkbox to unchecked? And they're like, no. Could you? Yeah, we could. I mean, it would just be a request. It would cost whatever, $400. And so we're like, that's actually the solution. The solution is to default the box to unchecked, not to get a robotic process automation tool that's going to cost like 10 grand a month, a year with UiPath back then and all this other stuff. And all these screenshots, and if you change the screens, the RPA can't find it anymore. All this like crazy stuff. That's the solution. And so what was interesting was we were lucky to be able to have very much front-loaded getting some of those users in to give us like their perspective, because otherwise you just would have wasted time, and it would have been ridiculous to do like a project where you could have just thought about it differently. And I think that's what happens with having the people in the room is what we want to do ultimately is give them the capacity to be able to speak out and like think a little differently. A lot of times, and that's the problem, Michael, I think the problem with AI in general, right, is like you said, a lot of people I work with, they call me and they say, Michael, our whatever CEO just went to a conference on AI and now we have to use AI. And we don't know why or how, right? And so like, and I'm saying to them, right, and I'm saying to them, well, I don't think AI is the solution. Like they've diagnosed a tool that may not solve your problem. It could just be use the tool better, or maybe like the example I just gave. I mean, just put in an enhancement that the tool does the fix, right, or the automation. And so I think that's part of the challenge. And I think ultimately what's interesting is where I think we could also get a very big leg up on some of these things, which what I'm finding is that especially the organizations that have been around for a long time, it's hard to get, standard operating procedures. Oh, and I just see a note from Rodney. Documented processes are like rare earth. Right. So exactly.
And it's so funny. Rule number one of automation is like do it manual and write it down first, because you can't automate it.
Exactly.
If you can't write it down, right? Like,
right.
But it is rare.
Which is funny because, Automation Anywhere, I don't know if they still have this, but years ago, Automation Anywhere had this cool tool where you would do a screen record of your process and then it would document all your processes. That was one of the cool things about that tool. But that's really the reality. So part of the work that is hard work is all of that stuff, right? But then it's like actually doing the current state documentation, because the first step of this discovery is, oh, send me your documentation, send me your standard operating procedures. And a lot of times, even if you get the standard operating procedures, it may not be to the depth of what you need, or it could, may not be written in the way that
it may not be. It's funny, even in our industry, in the IT support space, everyone is going back and writing down everything in infinite detail now, with the intent that AI will do it later, and they want to get the data right. So, like, it's not good enough to say I fixed it. Like, how did you fix it?
Right.
Well, I fixed it by doing this. No. How specifically did you fix? So everyone's taking 3 times the time right now just to infinitely document out every single fix to create a knowledge base, so that an AI can then later say, this seems like the article you need, which isn't technically a bad use case. It's just that, wow, like every single person is having to work, make it the infinite documentation case for the rest of their lives to make this work.
Well, and it's not just for AI's sake, right? I mean, if you're if you're an organization or if you've ever gone through like an acquisition process where, you know, a company has come in and bought your company, or you worked at a company where they bought your company or bought the company, uh, operating procedures and documentation is a key piece to the acquisition, because they're buying you not for you, right? They're buying you for your processes, your software, what you do that's so great that is going to fit really well into the business that is acquiring you. And I mean, I've been through it. I went through it twice in my career, and it was very much like we didn't have a lot of good documentation. We had to write up documentation because the acquiring company was like, all right, great, you have this great software, you have great numbers, great this, great that, but how does it actually work? Like, how do you onboard a client? And the answer couldn't be, well, we fly to Georgia and we sit down to do discovery, and then we go back and fill out the user interface. Like, it was all in our brains, right? Because we were all trained like one-to-one with the person who was trained on it from someone else. And we didn't have like a piece of paper. It was just someone trained us, right? And you had like the guru. Yeah, and so you had the guru who was at the office, who was the trainer of the trainers. And so I think that's another piece of it, right? Is yes, there's definitely value in standard process or process operating stuff and documentation. But I think the other piece of it, not that everything's going to get acquired, but it's not just the AI piece as well, but it really is that in order for scale, right? AI will help us scale. But I also think another piece just around the operating procedure part is that, one of the things I find that clients really want help with, and they want AI to help with, is staff onboarding or client onboarding, right? And so that's where like operating procedures comes in, is there, as you're hiring staff or you're replacing staff, I mean, people are overwhelmed with, just like I mentioned, someone has to sit down with someone, right? And then you have to ask the question versus like read through the directions. And if it's clear enough, you'll be able to look and be self-sufficient.
I wanted to take a couple minutes to share just a couple of stories from my angle, because it's funny that all of us have the same story, sort of like, there's a big joke about how AI is the road to RPA, right? Because like so many of the things people are coming to say I need to do AI are just simple robotic process automation. But
yeah,
but for decades, people have been begging people to just automate the crazy friction stuff, and no one was interested. And now they are, so that's great. But a good several years ago, Mavenspire was working with a customer where the C-level had dictated that they needed to get sales up 30% year over year. And they went through a process where they, obviously went to the leading edge acquisitional sales force, the marketing teams, everybody had built their plans, and they went out there, and they were having this issue where they just didn't see the growth. The sales team was reporting that they're just getting crushed. Like they're out there, they're closing, 50% more deals, and marketing investments way up, and they're reporting that everything is working by KPI, and no one can figure it out. And they finally asked operations, and operations came back and said, oh my God, we have so many orders. We're like 3 weeks backlog entering them. So like we've closed the sale, but we just can't get them entered into the system, right? And so they brought us over to say, let's look at this process. Maybe there's a way to fix the process. And like all things back then were, when we actually asked the people doing it, is it a process problem? They said, you know what it actually is? Every time we enter an order and hit save, it's a minute 20 seconds for it to confirm. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but then every hour it takes 5 minutes to reorganize. So what we do is we go get a coffee every hour, but we have to wait a minute 20 for every order. And an order, and then they pointed to their desk, there was like a stack of paper. They're like, all of those are orders. So I just can't get them done in a day because I'm losing a minute 20 every time I do one. And it takes about 30 seconds to enter one. So you can see what's going on. And so we're like, well, so from a process point of view, they're like, it's a simple process. That's why we have a big stack of papers here. It's just the save time. And so we actually went and looked, and somebody had deleted an index in the SQL database. So we put the index back, and the save time went down to 2 seconds. And everyone was like, okay, well, we have a backlog. It's going to take a couple weeks to catch up. But yeah, now we totally bring it on, man. We'll have plenty of power, right? Like, well, right. But it's always the thing you don't look at, the people you don't include in the conversation that holds you back from the goal. It's never the ones you're totally focused on because everyone's thinking about it. It's the people on the side.
Yeah.
For my second example, this is actually an AI example. There's a lot of concern when you're talking to the people who do it about losing their job to AI. Unfortunately, the media has really helped with this whole like, let's fire a bunch of coders and then the AI does the coding. But truthfully, um, the vast majority of the simple first time projects are around the phrase other duties as assigned. For all those people in the world where they have a job and then people have just tagged on other duties as assigned, and this has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger over time. AI is a great opportunity to start peeling some of that stuff off so you can pay more careful attention to the like core things. And no better example I've seen so far has been in actually the calling space where you're not really building an internal AI necessarily on your data. What you're doing is you're renting somebody's work doing it somewhere else where they have a platform and they've built out virtual agents, agentic AI, that can do the stuff like answer the phone, schedule an appointment, answer a basic question, and if they don't know, route you to somebody who does know. And I've seen this like when, it's so funny in the technical biz, everyone's so frustrated if they work a problem and then they have to escalate it and they end up in a tier one help desk because that has no value, right? But the problem is they can't just route you up to tier 2 or 3 because there are fewer of those people.
Sure.
But the promise of AI, agentic AI, is a middle ground. Like we can get you to something that has more access than tier 1 that understands you've probably done that, where it can simply ask you, have you already tried this? Here's what I'm going to try automatically, which our tier 2 would have done normally anyway. I'll let you know if it works. And then let's try to work together on some tier 3 stuff. And if I can't solve it in that, then I'll send you to one of the humans who now have their load taken down because a lot of it is routed away from them, but it's not tier 1. And that's such a different experience for customers and employees. Like it's less friction, less frustration to have something with the access who can actually look a little deeper, knowing that you've already gone through the basics already, and that is catching fire. Like there's a big question about will help desk all flip over entirely to AI. I personally believe in the cases where those like let me check you processes can be put in agent, of course they will be. And the people that are actually the ones that can fix it in the event that none of that works are the people that will still be people because they're the ones who'll have to get into the process and do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, no, 100%. And even the experience on our desktops, right, which is what you're talking about, is, I mean, just having an agent on your desktop that could help you change something like your monitor, or you know how it is. You use your computer and you have an issue with it doesn't link over to the TV you're trying to project from. You got to remember where to do it, right? Not everyone remembers those things. So I think that's another one of those things where, I think it'll help. It'll help us not have to think of as much on some of those things.
The one thing that agentic AI appears to be, when well done, is patient. So I've tried it with like my elderly mother, and like I find it just does a better job with people who need someone to like be patient and listen to them and respond to them than truthfully I could ever do. Right. So I really appreciate it for its patience. At least right now.
That is true. It's patience, and it's a lot of times overly positive attitude.
All right, let me ask again if there are any questions. I mean, if we're saying everything that you needed to know and you agree with us, that's obviously great too. But if there have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. I think as a wrap up, let's go back to the who question for a minute. So what we both said from different perspectives and experience that the number one key thing about who's at the table is it has to include the leadership that is providing the goal and the KPI. How do you know when you've
Hmm.
arrived at the goal? It has to include the people that do it every day because you're potentially going to change something and they have the insight on whether you're even working on a sprint or project that is going to ultimately add up to the goal. Like they're going to be able to tell you if that's the real problem or not. And they need to have the freedom and be empowered to speak up. And then the people in the middle are the operational layers, the technologists, the managers
Hmm.
in the middle who might have their own spin on the goal or might have great insight into how that goal is wrapped up within their organization. Um, they may be including other audiences, quite frankly, right? Because we may be focused on this operational thing and then find out later that sales and marketing need to be there, or right. And that's how you get everyone at the table by having kind of it's like the layered sandwich approach of
Hmm.
between the bread, you have to get everything in there.
Yeah.
Do you agree that I miss anybody? Oh, I'm sorry, I did. I missed one thing. Culture. If
Yeah.
you aren't going to build out or enhance a culture of innovation where it's okay to try, it's okay to fail, things work in little sprints so that you're constantly trying to compare things to see which one's better. The problem you're going to get into is people are going to be afraid to speak up. And that will just mean you'll implement something imperfect. I mean, it's not different for any innovation, change, and modernization project that has ever existed. It's just with AI, you can get deep down the well before you find that out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you mentioned, it goes back to that old adage, people, process, and tools, right? I mean, AI lives on the tool side. I think your story and your example of the discrepancies of the sales team versus the team, unable to put stuff in, right? It's interesting because a lot of times people are jumping over to the tools. Maybe don't have the processes documented or great efficient processes, but also there's an assumption sometimes that, these processes and tools are going to, help or remedy people challenges, right? And a lot of times the people challenges are the challenges. And so when you talk about the growth mindset and having a culture where people want to be innovative and want to push forward to always be trying to be better, right? Like, yes, they do have AI tools out there now who will look at your operating procedures and give you recommendations, right? But people need to kind of have that mindset and have that lens as they're looking at things to think about how it can get better. And I think what's interesting with that is I think that's some of the obstacles that I've seen around AI adoption and staff is that it's the staff members who are innovative and want like to do more and want to think about change. They love the AI. They love the opportunity to like have something new and fun. But the folks who are a little bit more timid or don't really want to go outside of the comfort zone, right? The same folks who aren't necessarily trying to think about innovation, they're the ones that are a little more hesitant around using new technology. But it's not just AI, right? I'm sure those same folks also, I'll tell you, like I find out that they also don't like to do meeting invites on Outlook.
Hmm.
So I don't like to say AI is a bad thing. It's really like technology. It's really change, right? You do something for a long time. It could be any tool that comes in. Um, it may not be something that people want to use. And I think the other example is that there's AI. Think about how payment processing has changed just for us personally, right? Like contactless, Apple Pay. I mean, it's a shift as well, right? People still carry cash. Some people still have credit cards. They want to swipe their credit card. It's the same. It's the same thing, right? AI is just it's just another iteration of something more automated, and everything that we do is also another iteration of being automated. So
Well, Michael, thank you for today. I really appreciate the conversation, as always. I don't see any questions in the chat, so I think we can wrap up. I'm going to thank everyone for attending today.